I'm going to be going over how I deploy code to Saffron. I made a little diagram because what I do is kind of interesting. So I have my front end and back end on two different services. So one, my back end is on DigitalOcean over here, and over here my front end is on Netlify. Now before I go over how I deployed each of them and how I make sure they're in sync or whatnot, I want to talk about the environments that I have set up, because right now I have two. So one is a production environment, which is what everyone uses if they just go to the main website over here. And so how that works is I have a Netlify website for that, and that Netlify website talks to my backend. And then I have an Nginx load balancer that takes it to the production server and then talks to the database or whatnot. But I also have set up a staging or a testing website or a testing staging server, because whenever I make code changes, I want to make sure it looks good before just pushing it to production and make sure nothing breaks or whatnot. So to be able to do that, I have another site on Netlify. It's a different URL that I go to, and then it's going to be talking to the same DigitalOcean. And by the way, this whole DigitalOcean box right here, this currently is one DigitalOcean instance that has all this stuff inside of it, but pretty much how this expands, or you could think of it as one DigitalOcean private thing. So for example, these could be their own DigitalOcean droplets, and they all communicate under a private network. So that's pretty much the future of how it's going to work. So that's what this kind of DigitalOcean box is droplets all under a private network talking to each other. But right now they're all in one droplet, which makes it a little simpler. But anyway, so now the staging website communicates to the same thing, but it's going to route the code or the request to a staging server and a test server. Right now I have a single database, so the data is the same between the staging and production. Basically, the reason there is I just want to be able to see the same data, but I want to see, for example, make UI changes, be able to format the data in different ways or whatnot. But I want to see the same data, and I want to work with the same data with that. And of course, just using, like, for example, test users on the staging and the test. So that's pretty much how it works. I create two Netlify instances, the Netlify or websites, and the Netlify websites both talk to the same thing, and then Nginx routes the staging to the staging one and the prod to the prod one, and that's how I handle the environments. Now, how do I actually deploy this stuff? So before I talk about that, you kind of need to know how it works on Netlify over here. So for example, if you usually go to a website and someone pushes new code, you won't get the new code for the website unless you refresh the page. That's usually how a website would work, or you navigate to a new page and it reloads. So it's possible to stay on the same version of code even though someone pushes new code. So for example, if I push new code to Netlify, not all the users will get the latest code because they might not have refreshed the page yet, and they might be just using the same page as before. So how does it work with Saffron? Because Saffron's not a regular website. It uses service workers, and it uses React Router to route between pages. So it doesn't refresh every time I change pages. So when I come in to sign in over here, the page does not refresh or reload because I'm using React Router. So React Router does not reload it. So between these two page navigations, it does not reload, and it does not pull new code from Netlify. So even though maybe I've pushed new code to Netlify, I don't get new code when I change pages or when I'm doing stuff. So I have to actually just refresh the page to be able to get new code. And no one really does that. Users don't really just refresh the page. So new users, really the only way they would get the new code is they come and they enter the URL and they reload Saffron, like if they closed a tab or something and they came back. So with that setup, a lot of times, and we're going to talk about how I improved that slightly, but a lot of times you're going to have users that are using old versions of your front end code. So there might be all across the world or all across whoever your users are, you might have some people on version 1, some people on version 2 of your website. Not everyone's going to be on the exact same version. And so that's when I talked about you don't actually need to have your DigitalOcean and your Netlify in sync, because it doesn't matter. Whatever I deploy to Netlify, not everyone is going to get it right away. So what that means is on DigitalOcean in my production server over here, whenever I push code to it, it needs to be able to handle all the past versions of the website code. Now, eventually, less and less people will be using the older code, which is good, so you can eventually phase it out. But in general, this code needs to be able to support the 5 last versions of the code that I've pushed. And it also needs to support all the new, because there can be varying versions of people using it. So with that said, pretty much what happens is I'll push new code to DigitalOcean to my production server first, and I'm using Doku for that, and Doku handles all this. And what Doku does is it spins up another instance of this production server, and then when this production server, the new version, is finished booting up, it removes the old one and points all the new stuff. So you never lose any requests, or hopefully that's the goal. Is the backend is always up when I deploy stuff to it. But it needs to be able to handle old code versions, so that's important. So it doesn't need to be in sync. So at first I thought I'd have to be able to push my code to DigitalOcean and push my code to Netlify at the same time. But really what I do is I push the code to DigitalOcean, and when that's good, I then push the code to Netlify. And then this DigitalOcean code should be able to handle the new code that I push to Netlify and the old code as well. Now, I also did some stuff to help mitigate the number of users that are using old code, because we pretty much always want to be able to upgrade. So really the main problem is when people are using React Router, the page does not reload whenever we change pages. But really the ideal thing we want is whenever a new version of the code is out, I want them, whenever they change pages, to then reload the page. Or not reload the page because they could be in the middle of something, but the next time they navigate pages. So let's say I push code to Netlify and I want this user right here to get the new code. Well, when they click sign in, I'd like to download the code. Well, the code should be already downloaded, but it should be swapped out when they go to the sign in. And the way I do that is a plugin called Offline Plugin, which is kind of funny because I actually have no intention of wanting to be able to do offline capabilities with this, at least not right now. All I really want is to be able to know when I have a new version of code on Netlify, download that code, and then be able to then swap out what happens the next time the user changes pages. But Offline Plugin allows you to do that. And I'd love to hear if you guys know better ways to do this, because I want to make this experience as best as possible for the users. And this, so far, I think it's pretty seamless. And basically what happens is the Offline Plugin pulls for a certain interval of time, and then whenever it looks for updates in Netlify. So whenever a new bundle is pushed to Netlify or new code is pulled to Netlify, what it does is in the background it downloads that code, and then it has a callback. So in my code I know when a new version is given, and so when a new version is given, I say, all right, instead of pushing, so usually you say history.push to change pages in React Router, I'll just give them a regular link here. That way it actually loads the page again, and then it's going to swap out the new code. So the user will be upgraded without them even knowing the code has changed, which is really nice. And of course it works the same if I just reload the page, that would also work as well. And this uses service workers, if you've heard of those. So it works in the background and does all that stuff. So that's pretty much how I have Saffron deployments working and the environments I have set up with that, and how I'm able to, I basically have 2 websites up at the same time, both the staging or testing, if you will, and the production one. And I could set up more if I wanted to, but that's enough for me right now. And then I push my code to DigitalOcean first, upgrade that, and then I push my code to Netlify. And then as people are using the site, they'll eventually get the upgraded code from Netlify as they change pages, and Offline Plugin alerts them. Well, actually, it doesn't alert them; it just does in the background.